Hello everyone and welcome to Module 5, how to write introductions that impress the examiner in under 5 minutes. So let's look at what we're going to do today. First we're going to look at common mistakes that people make whenever they write introductions. We're going to look at why introductions are so important and how they can get you good grades. We're going to look at the basic structure of a good introduction, how to write one in more detail, and we're going to look at examples for each of the 5 different question types. So let's review what we did in the last module. We learned how and why we should plan and why it's very, very important to plan, how to quickly and easily think of ideas, how to organize our time, and how to reduce vocabulary and grammar mistakes. A very important lesson. So if you haven't looked at the last lesson, please go back and have a look at it. So let's move on and look at the common mistakes people make whenever they are writing introductions. So the first one is writing long general background statements or hooks. There are no marks for being interesting or entertaining. You don't need to write an interesting first sentence in your introduction. You don't need to write something to hook the reader in. There are no marks for being interesting or entertaining. So please don't write these long background statements. The second point is you don't have time. Every minute is important, and if you're doing something that doesn't get you marks, then it is a waste of time. Most of these background statements include words like nowadays, in the modern world, in modern life, and IELTS examiners see these again and again and again, and they don't impress the examiner at all. This is one of the things that the examiners don't like. So common mistake number 2, there's no opinion or outline of your main ideas. Your opinion must be clear throughout the whole essay. As we discussed in one of the previous modules, if your opinion is not clear throughout the whole essay, you can't get over a band 6 for task response. So it's really, really important that you include your opinion in the introduction. It's the most important part. Also, if you include an outline of your main ideas, so just a brief outline, you don't need to go into any detail, it makes it easier for the reader, for the examiner, to understand your main points. So if you tell them what your main points are going to be, it's much easier for them to understand the whole essay, and that gets you marks for coherence and cohesion. Common mistake number 3, copying the question. If you just copy the question fully, the examiner will delete it and you'll receive no marks for that part of the exam. So it's a big mistake. Do not copy the question. You can copy words from the question, but please do not copy the whole section. So let's look at some bad examples. Here's the question that we're going to use today. The continued rise in the world's population is the greatest threat faced by humanity, human beings, people, at the present time. Do you agree? So this is an example of a very bad introduction. Nowadays, the rising of the population is a very controversial issue, and it is undeniably a very serious issue in the modern world. This essay will discuss it and then make a conclusion. Now you might think this is a terrible introduction, but this is a very, very common style of introduction. There's 2 main reasons why it's bad. First main reason is you have a background statement in the very first statement. So nowadays, in the modern world, it's a controversial issue. This is not adding anything to your essay. So it's not getting any marks, so it is a complete waste of time to write it. Also, this essay will discuss it. There's no opinion, okay? They haven't outlined their main ideas. So the 3 essential elements are not included in that essay. Let's look at another bad example. It is undeniable that in the modern world there are too many people, and it is without question that it is a very serious issue. This essay will explore these issues. So again, they have a very vague background statement that doesn't really add anything to the essay, and they don't give their opinion, and they don't outline their main ideas. So these are 2 examples of very poor introductions. So why are introductions so important? first impressions, it's the very first thing that the examiner will read. And say the examiner is marking 20 IELTS papers that day, I guarantee that 18 of them will have very bad introductions, similar to the ones that we just looked at. And then they will read your introduction, and it will be like a breath of fresh air. You'll make the examiner very happy, and they'll know that the rest of your essay is going to be very good. Next, it helps you avoid stress and panic. If you start off your essay very, very well, it will reduce your stress and you won't panic, and that will lead to you writing a better essay. The whole of your essay will be better. Task response. If you include your opinion for task response, you will get a higher mark. Coherence and cohesion. If you write a very good introduction and organize your main ideas, and it makes everything easier to understand, you will write a more coherent and more cohesive essay, and you'll get higher marks for that. Focus. It helps you create a mini plan for the rest of your essay. If you write your opinion in the introduction and you write, say, 2 or 3 main ideas, that is like a mini plan. So you will be very focused on the rest of your essay, and your essay, you won't get lost in it, and your essay will be very coherent. So structure. Let's look at the 3 things that you should include. So you should always paraphrase the question. We're going to look at that in more detail in a minute. You should always include your opinion, and you should always outline your main points. Now, sometimes it doesn't ask you for your opinion. If it doesn't ask you for your opinion, just outline the main points, and that will be considered your opinion. And we're going to look at that in much more detail soon. So you combine these 3 things into just 2 sentences. Your introduction should never be longer than 2 sentences. Most of your marks are going to come from the main body paragraphs, so you don't want to spend too much time on the introduction. You just want to paraphrase the question, give your opinion, and outline your main ideas as quickly as possible. So you want to get this all done in less than 5 minutes, and it should be around 40 to 60 words. So let's look at what paraphrasing is. The very first sentence in our essay should be paraphrasing the question statement. So paraphrasing means that you repeat the question statement so that it has the same meaning but with different words. And there are different ways that we can do that. You can do that using synonyms, different forms of the same word. You can flip the clauses, rearrange the clauses, or you can use examples. So let's look at these things in more detail. What are synonyms? Synonyms are different words that have the same meaning. For example, if you consume something, you use it. So you could a car consumes petrol. It uses petrol. And people, a synonym of people is humans, or human beings, or men and women, or humanity. IT, information technology, a synonym would be computers. Or you could use an example like laptops or iPads or something like that. Teenagers, adolescents. So adolescents are people between the ages of, say, 13 and 18. So they are teenagers. Governments, you could describe a government as the state. An advantage, you could describe it as a benefit. An advantage and a benefit are the same thing. So same meaning, 2 different words. So these are synonyms. So let's take a real example and try to paraphrase it. So you're going to paraphrase the question statement. So the question statement is the bit that I have underlined here in red. So that's the question statement. This is the instructions. Do you agree or disagree? So we don't paraphrase it. Okay, so increasing overpopulation. So the continued rise in the world's population. I have paraphrased that to increasing overpopulation. So continued rise, increasing. World's population, overpopulation, is the biggest threat. So I've changed greatest to biggest. I've kept threat. It's okay to keep 1 or 2 words. Humanity, I've changed to human beings. And face today. Okay, so increasing overpopulation is the biggest threat human beings face today. So this means the same as the question statement. Let's look at another way we could paraphrase it. The primary threat that people currently face is the continued increase of the planet's population. So what I've done here is I've switched the clauses. So the first clause was the continued rise in the world's population. I have made it the second clause down here. And the first clause here is the primary threat that people currently face. I have taken the second clause from up here and put it in the first clause. So you've just flipped the clauses a little bit. So greatest threat, I've changed to the primary threat. Humanity, I've changed to people. Currently faces the continuous rise. So I've changed continued to continuous. Continued and continuous are just different versions of the same word. Rise, increase, synonyms, and world and planet are synonyms, and I've kept population. Okay, so don't be afraid to repeat a word. Lots of people don't like repeating words because they have heard from teachers and read in books that you should never repeat the same word as in the question. And that is bad advice, because what happens is people try to change every single word and they don't know every single word. So if we go back and have a look here, the words that I didn't repeat were threat and population. So you might know synonyms for everything else, you might be able to paraphrase everything else, but you can't think of a word for threat and you can't think of a word for population. It is much better just to repeat the word and get it correct than try and use a word that you don't know and get it incorrect. So you can copy one or two words from the question, that's no problem. If you change a word, the grammar must also be correct. So lots of people change the synonyms, but they don't look at the grammar. So especially if the form of the word changes, you must be aware of the grammar. So when you're paraphrasing, read the whole sentence and just check that the grammar is correct. So practice makes perfect. When you first start doing these, it might appear difficult, but the more you do them, the easier it becomes. So keep practicing. So paraphrasing is a skill, and like any skill, you have to practice it. And the more you practice it, the better you are going to become at that skill. And paraphrasing is no different from that. So I'm going to share with you a practice strategy that has helped a huge number of our students, and this is what they do. So number one, they get lots of practice questions. Now, lots I know is a vague term. Some students just need 5, some students need 50. It depends on how much practice you want to do. And we'll talk about that in this section as well. But what I would recommend, get between 5 and 10 practice questions. You can get those in the Cambridge practice papers, or you can get those in the practice questions in the course, the Band 9 Essay Bank. Just go and find those, and it would be a good idea to put them into one document where you can use them. Make sure, as always, you are using real practice questions, either produced by IELTS Advantage or by Cambridge or the British Council or IDP. If you use other sources, then there's a likelihood that the questions will not be genuine and will not be reliable, and you'll be practicing using bad questions. So that's it. Get the practice questions and then simply practice paraphrasing them. When you are learning a new skill, it is important that you don't try and rush the process. So don't try and do them in 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes. In the beginning, try to focus on quality, on accuracy, on getting it right and spending enough time thinking about it, and then try and build up your speed from there. After you have finished paraphrasing them, one of the key things that the examiners will be checking, and one of the key areas where students go wrong, is that they change a word without fully understanding the meaning of that word. It's very common when students try and use synonyms. So if you're unsure of any of the words that you have just changed, get a dictionary and compare the meaning of the changed word with the word that you changed. If it means the same, great, you're on the right track. If it doesn't mean the same, then you know that you've made a mistake and you learn from that mistake and you don't make that mistake again. And it will also help you improve your overall general vocabulary, because even if you do make a mistake, now you have understood the meaning, the real meaning of that word. You can use it again in a different context. And then really think about the grammar, especially things like articles, prepositions, word order, punctuation, subject-verb agreement, countable, uncountable nouns. These are the common mistakes that students make when they are not only paraphrasing but writing any sentence. But the key thing about paraphrasing is that when you change words around, it changes the relationship of those words. So you really need to think about the grammar. And then simply repeat that. So what you're doing here is you are operating as an independent student. You're able to give yourself feedback. And if you have any questions, of course, you can reach out and ask us. But I would strongly recommend getting used to giving yourself feedback in this way, because feedback from a teacher is very, very good, but it is not nearly as powerful as you being able to look at your own paraphrasing and assess and give yourself feedback. That is going to accelerate your learning much quicker than having to send it to us and then we explain it and you're not fully understanding it. If you can internalize it and give yourself feedback, you're going to really, really, really improve. And when will you know that you're ready and you don't have to do so much intensive practice on paraphrasing? Well, you will notice your progression. You will notice that more and more words that you are using are more accurate. You'll also notice that you're making fewer grammar mistakes. And then when you decide to submit your writing to us, we will give you 100% accurate feedback and tell you whether you're making any mistakes or not. If you're not making any major mistakes in paraphrasing, then you know that you're on the right track. Whereas if the teacher mentions that you need to improve your paraphrasing, then you need to continue practicing. The most important thing you have to do in the introduction is answer the question. So let's look at this again. Two choices with this one. Each question type is going to be different, but to answer the question for this one, all you have to do is make a choice. Agree or disagree. Very easy. So we could say this essay totally agrees with this statement, or I completely disagree with this statement. You don't have to use these exact sentences, but this is just to show you two ways of doing this. And it's no problem to use the word I, because it says here, if you look, do you agree? So that means it's totally fine to use personal pronouns like I. Don't use them throughout the whole essay, but when you're giving your opinion, it is no problem to do that. If you want to remain very, very academic, you can just use this essay instead of using I. So your outline, why do I agree? So just imagine that I totally agree with this statement. I agree with this statement, so my two main ideas are going to be the planet will run out of resources, so things like oil and wood and food, and if there are too many people, it will damage the planet. So I'm just going to outline those two reasons here. So if we look down at the bottom, this essay totally agrees with this statement because this will lead to a serious depletion of resources and pollution. So here is my opinion. This essay totally agrees with this statement. Okay, so that's just my opinion. Then I'm going to give my outline. So the first bit is, this will lead to a serious depletion of resources, run out of resources. My second main idea is damage to the planet. Damage to the planet, we could just say solution. So we have three elements. We have our opinion here, we have our first main idea here, and we have our second main idea here. And they are linked together with one word, simple word, because. So putting it all together. Increasing overpopulation is the biggest threat human beings face today. This essay totally agrees with this statement because This will lead to a serious depletion of resources and pollution. So in red is the paraphrasing of the question, in blue is my opinion, and in green is the outline of my main ideas. So two sentences, very, very simple, and that is the perfect introduction, having those three things. We're now going to go through opinion, discussion, advantages and disadvantages, problems and solutions, and double questions. So for every introduction or every different type of question, there's going to be a slightly different introduction. So we're going to go through each of them step by step. So let's start off with opinion questions. Here's a question we're going to use. In some countries, an increasing number of people are suffering from health problems as a result of eating too much fast food. It is therefore necessary for governments to impose a higher tax on this kind of food. Do you agree? So the first thing we need to do is paraphrase the question. It is argued that states should charge fast food companies more tax because of the growing amount of men and women with health conditions associated with this type of food. So you should notice there that I have, instead of countries, I have used states. Number of people, I've said a growing amount of men and women, so an increasing number of people, a growing amount of men and women. Health problems, I've stated that health conditions associated with this type of food. So now let's go on to our plan. So my plan is I agree with this. The first reason why I agree with this is it costs the health service money and increased prices would reduce demand. So these are my two outline ideas, my basic ideas. So this essay totally agrees with that statement because these illnesses cost the health service too much money, and increasing the price of junk food would reduce the demand for it. So this essay totally agrees with that statement, is my opinion. I have joined my opinion and my main ideas with the word because, and my two main ideas are these illnesses cost the health service too much money, and increasing the price of junk food would reduce the demand for it. So the whole introduction looks like this. It is argued that states should charge fast food companies more tax because of the growing amount of men and women with health conditions associated with this type of food. This essay totally agrees with that statement because these illnesses cost the health service too much money, and increasing the price of junk food would reduce the demand for it. So 60 words exactly. So this was quite a long introduction. It doesn't need to be quite as long as this most of the time. And I'll just highlight something here. It is argued that when we are discussing someone else's opinion. So someone else's opinion is states should charge fast food companies more tax. If we want to discuss someone else's opinion, we can start the introduction with it is argued that. So let's move on to discussion questions. So these are slightly different. Here is an example discussion question. Some people work for the same organization all their working life. Others think that it is better to work for different organizations. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. So this is different because there are two sides of the story. So we need to think about it in a different way. So our introduction is going to be slightly different. However, the paraphrase is always the same. Some say that it is more beneficial to be employed with the same company all their lives, while others would argue that it is better to work for a variety of companies. So you'll notice that I used some say that and while others would argue. So there's always going to be two opinions. So this is opinion number one. And this is opinion number two. So I paraphrase it by saying some say that, and then stating the first opinion, while others would argue that, and then I state the second opinion. So this is how I normally structure in detail my discussion paraphrases. So let's look at our plan. So in these essays, you will have to discuss both views. So your plan will have to reflect that. So you'll have to think of why someone would think one way and why someone would think the other way. So the main reason why a person would think that you should work for the same place is because you will get more benefits, so more money and more ancillary benefits. The main reason why you would move to different places is because you will get a wider range of experience. So these are my two main ideas. So this essay will argue that although working for just one employer gives you more financial and other benefits, working at lots of different places provides an employee with more experience. So you will notice that I have structured it in this way. This essay will argue that. Okay, so this is telling the examiner that this is your opinion. This is what you're going to argue. Argue means that you're going to argue your point. So although, the reason why I say although is I'm going to put the point that I don't agree with as much first. So although working for just one employer gives you more financial and other benefits, by stating although, I'm saying that I'm recognizing that some people think that, but I don't think that. Then comma, and I'm going to state the one that I agree with. Working at lots of different places provides an employee with more experience. So just the word although will tell the examiner that I know that some people agree with this one, but I agree with this one more. So let's look at the whole introduction together. Some say that it is more beneficial to be employed with the same company all their lives, while others would argue that it is better to work for a variety of companies. So we've just paraphrased this sentence here. This essay will argue that although working for just one employer gives you more financial and other benefits, so this is the part that we don't really agree with. Working at lots of different places provides an employee with more experience. So this is our opinion. This is the one that we agree with. So by doing all of this, we have discussed both views, outlined our main points, and given our opinion. So we have satisfied the three criteria: paraphrasing, opinion, and giving an outline of our main ideas. And it's only 62 words, so just over what I recommend, but you can go over by a few words, that's no problem. So can I just write, this essay will discuss both views and then come to a reasoned conclusion? No, you cannot write, this essay will discuss both views and then come to a reasoned conclusion. So lots of people would stop here. So they would paraphrase the sentence, and then after that, they would just say, this essay will discuss both views and then come to a reasoned conclusion. The reason why you can't write this is you haven't given your opinion and you haven't outlined your main ideas. If you finish your introduction by just stating this, you haven't satisfied the opinion criteria. So it's very important that you use the previous structure. So let's look at an advantages and disadvantages question. One of the consequences of improved medical care is that people are living longer and life expectancy is increasing. Do you think the advantages of this development outweigh the disadvantages? So the paraphrase is very simple. One of the results of modern medicine, so improved medical care, is that men and women, so people have changed to men and women, are able to live longer. So I've changed living longer to able to live longer. So a plan, I agree that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. I've made my decision. This is my opinion. The advantages are people will not suffer from disease and heartache of losing loved ones. If people live longer, they won't suffer as much from disease because of improved medical care, and people won't lose their family to death so much. So we have to discuss both these. The disadvantage is it puts a strain on the pension system. So the government has to give money to older people to help them live. So even though I agree that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, I still need to discuss both of them. So this essay will argue that despite the strain this might cause on the pension system, the alleviation of suffering means that the advantages far outweigh the drawbacks. Okay, so let's break this down. This essay will argue that. Okay, so we just start that off, and this tells the examiner I'm going to give my opinion. So a very important word is despite. Just like the discussion essays where we used the word although, despite tells the examiner I'm going to state a reason that I don't really agree with. So despite the strain this might cause on the pension system, so this is the disadvantage here. However, I agree that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, but I need to include my disadvantage to satisfy all the requirements of the question. So what I do is I say despite, and I put the one that I don't really agree with first, and then comma, I state the advantage, the alleviation, just stopping, of suffering. So people will not suffer and you won't lose your loved ones, so that means suffering, means that the advantages far outweigh the drawbacks. And I am very, very explicit with this because this tells the examiner that I know exactly how to answer this question. So the whole introduction looks like this. One of the results of modern medicine is that men and women are able to live longer. So we've clearly paraphrased the question. This essay will argue that despite the strain this might cause on the pension system, so we have mentioned our main disadvantage, the alleviation of suffering, this is our main advantage, means that the advantages far outweigh the drawbacks. So we've given a very, very clear opinion that's linked to the question. 44 words. So there are different types of advantages and disadvantages question. There are questions that ask you just discuss the advantages and disadvantages. There are questions that ask you discuss the advantages and disadvantages and give your own opinion. And there are questions like this one which state, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Now each of those introductions for each of those types of question are a little different. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a whole module, a whole lesson on advantages and disadvantages questions, and we're going to go through the introductions for each of them. So don't worry about the other types. Okay, so the question here, smartphones are becoming a common sight in the primary school classroom. What problem does this cause, and what is a viable solution? So our paraphrase is iPhones and other devices. So we've changed smartphones to iPhones and other devices. iPhones are the most popular smartphone, so it's fine to use that. Are being used more often by, instead of are becoming a common sight, we've simplified that and just said are being used more often by. And as you can see, that's very simple language, but it is very clear, effective, accurate language. We're not trying to show off in any way here. And primary school classroom, obviously they're talking about primary school children. So we have changed primary school classroom to primary school children. And we view this as one unit of language. So primary school children is one unit of language, and we have changed that to primary school classroom to primary school children. So let's look at our plan. Problem is they are distracting. They distract students, they stop students from learning. And the solution is to ban them, to stop students using them completely, to make them kind of against the rules. So this essay will suggest that they are very distracting and that the best solution is to ban them completely in class. So let's break this down a little bit. This essay will suggest that this is telling the examiner, I'm going to give you the problem. You could say this essay will suggest that the biggest problem is they are very distracting, but you don't have to. So this essay will suggest that they are very distracting. They are very distracting is the problem. And then we link the two by using the word and, just very simply. And then we give our solution, which is to ban, that the best solution is to ban them completely in class. So you'll notice with this one, it doesn't ask for your opinion, but by saying the problem is they're distracting and the solution is to ban them, you have given your opinion. So you've answered the question, and at the same time you have outlined your main ideas. In this question, your main ideas and your opinion are exactly the same thing. So the whole introduction: iPhones and other devices are being used more often by primary school children. We've paraphrased the question. This essay will suggest that they are very distracting, so we have given our opinion on the problem and we have outlined our main idea, and that the best solution is to ban them completely in class. So we've given our opinion about the solution and we have outlined our main idea, and that is 34 words. Very, very short, and that should take you 2 or 3 minutes to write. Once you get used to writing these, you'll start writing them very, very quickly. So let's look at our final question, a double question.
Car ownership has increased so rapidly over the past 30 years that many cities in the world are now one big traffic jam. How true do you think this statement is? That's the first question. And what can governments do to discourage people from using their cars? That's the second question. So our paraphrase: lots of city centres are highly congested due to an increase in the ownership of cars in the last 3 decades. So the questions that I would be asking myself if I was checking my own work and giving myself feedback on that paraphrase, I'd be thinking, does this mean the same thing as this? Yes. Is the vocabulary accurate and appropriate? Yes. And is the grammar accurate and appropriate? Yes. Great. I've made a great paraphrase. I can now move on to the next step. So let's have a look at the plan for this one. So for my first question, I'm going to say that this is true, but it's only really true during rush hour. Any of the cities that I have lived in, I've never lived in a city that was 24 hours a day congested. Most of the cities that have a problem with this only have a problem during rush hour peak times. So I'm going to say that. And then the measure to improve this, the obvious answer is better public transport. So if we have a look at the second part of our introduction, this essay will argue that this is only true during peak times. So I've said that it's true, but only during peak times. So I've answered the first question, and that improving public transport will reduce this. So saying what measures governments can do, what measures they can take to alleviate this problem. So clearly outlined my position on the first question and the second question. If we have a look at the whole introduction, lots of city centres are highly congested due to an increase in the ownership of cars in the last 3 decades. This essay will argue that this is true only during peak times and that improving public transport will reduce this.
So let's review what we've done in this module. In this module, we looked at the most common mistakes, things that you should not do. We looked at why introductions are so important and how they can get you higher grades. We looked at the structure, overall structure of a good introduction, the 3 things that a good introduction should have: paraphrase, outline of main ideas, and opinion. We looked at how to write one in detail, and we looked at examples for each of the 5 question types. We're going to be going through each of the 5 question types. Again, we're going to have a full lesson on each of the 5 question types, and we're going to look at introductions for each of them again. Okay, so don't worry if you didn't get everything first time. In the next module, we're going to learn how to write our supporting paragraphs. So we're going to move on to the main body. Okay, thank you very much, and see you in the next module.